Hi, welcome back. Just a reminder, this is being shared with permission from Scholastic and will be taken down in the beginning of June. Our riddle of the day from yesterday was, what goes through cities and fields but never moves? The answer was a road. The riddle of the day for today is, during which month do people sleep the least? I'm going to leave that there for you to think, and as you're thinking, we're going to go ahead and read our two chapters today. Just a reminder, we're reading chapters 33 and 34, and we're actually starting the final part of our story, which is part 3, Into the Fire. And it's got a quote that says, "Beauty is that Medusa's head, which men go armed to seek and sever. It is more deadly when most dead, and dead will stare and sting forever." All right, so our first chapter today is called Invasion. Telly turned from the window and saw nothing but empty beds. She was alone in the bunkhouse. She shook her head, foggy from sleep and disbelief. The ground rumbled beneath her bare feet, and the bunkhouse shuddered around her. Suddenly the plastic in one of the windows shattered, and the muffled cacophony from the outside rushed in to batter her ears. The entire building shook as if it would collapse. Where was everyone? Had they already fled the smoke, leaving her there to face this invasion alone? Callie ran for the door and threw it open. Before her, a hover car was landing, blinding her for a moment with a face full of dust. She recognized the machine's cruel lines from the special circumstances car that had first taken her to see Dr. Cable. But this one was equipped with 4 shimmering blades, one each where the wheels of a ground car would be, a cross between a normal hover car and the Ranger's helicopter. It could travel anywhere, Callie realized, inside a city or out in the wild. She remembered Dr. Cable's words, "We'll be there in a few hours." Callie forced the thought from her head. This attack couldn't have anything to do with her. The hover car struck the dusty ground with a thud. This was no time to be standing there wondering. She turned and ran. The camp was a chaos of smoke and running figures. Cooking fires had been blown from their pits, and scattered embers burned everywhere. 2 of the encampment's big buildings were ablaze. Chickens and rabbits scampered underfoot, dust and ashes coiled in rampant whirlwinds. Dozens of Smokies ran about, some trying to put out the fires, some trying to escape, some simply panicking. Through everything else, the forms of cruel pretties moved. Their gray uniforms passed like fleeting shadows through the confusion. Graceful and unhurried, as if unaware of the chaos around them, they set about subduing the panicking Smokies. They moved in a blur without any weapons that Tally could see, leaving everyone in their wake lying on the ground, bound and dazed. They were superhumanly fast and strong. The special operation had given them more than just terrible faces. Near the mess hall, about 2 dozen Smokies were making a stand, holding off a small handful of specials with axes and makeshift clubs. Callie made her way towards the fight. The incongruous smells of breakfast reached her through the choking haze of smoke. Her stomach growled. Callie realized that she had slept through breakfast call, too exhausted to wake up with everyone else. The specials must have waited until most of the Smokies were gathered in the mess hall before launching their invasion. Of course, they wanted to capture as many Smokies as possible in a single stroke. The specials weren't attacking the large group at the mess hall. They waited patiently in a ring around the building while their numbers increased, more hover cars landing every minute. If anyone tried to get past the cordon, they reacted swiftly, disarming and incapacitating whoever dared to run. But most of the Smokies were too shocked to resist, paralyzed by the terrible faces of their opponents. Even here, most people had never seen a cruel pretty. Tally pinned herself against a building, trying to disappear next to a stack of firewood. She shielded her eyes from the dust storm, searching for an escape route. There was no way to get into the center of the smoke, where her hoverboard lay on the broad roof of the trading post, charging in the sun. The forest was the only way out. A stretch of uncleared trees lay at the closest edge in town, only a 20-second dash away, but a special stood between her and the border of the dense trees and brush, waiting to intercept any stray Smokies. The woman's eyes scanned the approach to the forest, her head moving from side to side in a weirdly regular motion, like someone who was watching a slow-motion tennis match without much interest. Tally crept closer, staying pressed against the building. A hover car passed overhead, blowing a maelstrom of dust and loose wood chips into her eyes. When she could see again, Tally found an aging Ugly crouching next to her against the wall. "Hey," he hissed. She recognized the sagging features, the bitter expression. It was the boss. "Young lady, we have a problem." His harsh voice cut through the cacophony of the attack. She glanced in the direction of the waiting special. "Yeah, I know." Another hover car roared around them. He pulled her around the corner of the building, and down behind a drum that collected rainwater from the gutters. "You noticed her too?" He grinned, showing a missing tooth. "Maybe if we both run at once, one of us might make it, if the other one puts up a fight." Tally swallowed. "I guess." She peered out at the special, who stood as calmly as a crumbly waiting for a pleasure fairy. "But they're pretty fast." "That depends." He dropped the duffel bag from his shoulder. "There's two things I keep for emergencies." The boss unzipped the bag and pulled out a plastic container big enough for a sandwich. "This is one." He popped open one corner of the top, and a puff of dust rose up. A second later a wave of fire rushed into Tally's head. She covered her face, her eyes watering, and tried to cough up the finger of flame that had crawled down her throat. "Not bad, eh?" The boss chuckled. "That's pure habanero pepper, dried and ground down to dust. Not too bad in beans, but really bad for your eyes." Tally blinked away her tears and managed to speak. "Are you nuts?" "The other thing in this bag, which contains a representative sample of 200 years of rusty-era visual culture. Priceless and irreplaceable artifacts. So which do you want? Huh? Do you want the habanero pepper or the bag of magazines? Do you want to get caught while taking out our special friend, or save a precious piece of human heritage from these barbarians?" Tally coughed once more. "I guess I want to escape." The boss smiled. "Good. I'm sick of running. Sick of losing my hair, too, and being short-sighted. I've done my bit, and you look pretty fast." He handed her the duffel bag. It was heavy, but Tally had grown stronger since she had come to the smoke. Magazines were nothing compared with scrap metal. She thought of the first day she had arrived here, seeing a magazine for the first time in the library, realizing with horror what humanity had once looked like. These pictures had made her sick that first day, and now here she was, ready to save them. "Here's the plan," the boss said. "I'll go first, and when that special grabs me, I'll give her a face full of pepper. You run straight and fast, and don't look back. Got it?" "Yeah, with any luck, we both might make it, though I wouldn't mind a facelift. Ready?" Tally pulled the bag farther up her shoulder. "Let's go. 1, 2." The boss paused. "Oh dear, there's a problem, young lady." "What?" "You haven't got any shoes." Tally looked down. In her confusion she had stumbled barefoot out of the bunkhouse. The packed dirt of the smoke compound was easy enough to walk on, but in the forest— "You won't make it 10 meters, kid." The boss pulled the duffel bag away from her and handed her the plastic container. "Now get going." "But Tally said, "I don't want to go back to the city." "Yes, young lady, and I wouldn't mind getting some decent dental work, but we all have to make sacrifices. Starting now." On the last word he shoved her out from behind the drum. Tally stumbled forward, utterly exposed in the middle of the street. The roar of a hover car seemed to pass right over her head, and she instinctively ducked, dashing towards the cover of the forest. The special cocked her head towards Tally, calmly folded her arms, and frowned like a teacher spotting littlies playing where they shouldn't. Tally wondered if the pepper would do anything against the woman. If it affected the special like it had Tally, she might still make it into the forest, even if she was supposed to be the bait, even if she had no shoes, even if it turned out that David had already been caught and she'd never see him again. The thought unleashed a sudden torrent of anger inside her, and she ran straight at the woman, the container clenched in both hands. A smile broke out on the special's cruel feature. A split second before they collided, the special seemed to disappear, slipping out of sight like a coin in a magician's hand. In her next stride, Tally felt something hard connect with her shin, and pain shot up her leg. Her body tumbled forward, her hands reaching out to break her fall, the container slipping from her grasp. She hit the ground hard, skidding on her palms. As she rolled through the dirt, Tally glimpsed the special crouching behind her. The woman had simply ducked, invisibly fast, and Tally had tripped over her like some awkward littlie in a brawl. Shaking her head and spitting the dirt out of her mouth, Tally spotted the container just out of reach. She scrambled towards it, but a staggering weight came down on her, driving her face first into the ground. She felt her wrist pulled back and bound, hard plastic cuffs cutting into her flesh. She struggled but couldn't move. Then the awful weight lifted, and a nudge from a boot flipped her over effortlessly. The special stood over her, smiling coldly, holding the container. Now, Ugly," the cruel pretty said, "you just calm down. We don't want to hurt you, but we will if we have to." Tally started to speak, but her jaw clenched with pain. It had plowed into the ground where she had fallen. "What's so important about this?" the special asked, shaking the container, trying to peer through its translucent plastic. Out of the corner of her eye, Tally saw the boss making his way towards the forest. His run was slow and tortured, the duffel bag too heavy for him. "Open it and see," Tally spat painfully. "I will," she said, smiling, "but first things first." She turned her attention towards the boss, and her posture suddenly transformed into something animal, crouched and coiled like a cat ready to spring. Tally rolled back onto her shoulders, thrashing out wildly with both feet. Her kicks connected with the container, and it popped open, a puff of brownish green dust spraying all over the special. For a second a disbelieving expression spread over the woman's face. She made a gagging noise, her whole body shuddering. Then her fists and eyes clamped shut, and she screamed. The sound wasn't human. It cut into Tally's ears like a vibrasaw striking metal, and every muscle in her body fought to get free of the handcuffs, her instincts demanding that she cover her ears. With another wild kick, she rolled herself over and stumbled to her feet, staggering in the direction of the forest. A tickle grew in Tally's throat as the pepper dust dispersed on the wind. She coughed as she ran, eyes watering and stinging until she was half blind. With her hand tied behind her, Tally lurched into the brush off balance, tumbling to the ground as her bare feet caught on something in the dense vegetation. She struggled forward, trying to drag herself out of sight. Blinking away tears, she saw that the special's inhuman scream had been some kind of alarm. 3 more of the cruel pretties had responded. One led the pepper-covered special away at arm's length, and the others approached the forest. Tally froze. The brush barely concealed her. Then she felt a tickle in her throat, a slowly growing irritation. Tally held her breath, closing her eyes, but her chest began to shudder, her body twitching and demanding to expel the traces of pepper from her lungs. She had to cough. Tally swallowed again and again, hoping spit could put out the fire in her throat. Her lungs demanded oxygen, but she didn't dare breathe. One of the specials was only a stone's throw away, scanning the forest with slow back and forth sweeps of his head, his eyes searching into the dense trees relentlessly. Gradually, painfully, the flame seemed to expire in Tally's chest, the cough dying a quiet death inside of her, and she relaxed, finally letting out her breath. Over the thunder of hover cars and the crackle of burning buildings and the sound of battle, the special had somehow heard her soft exhalation. His head turned swiftly, his eyes narrowing. In what looked like a single motion, he was by her side, a hand on the back of her neck. "You're a tricky one," he said. She tried to answer, but wound up, coughing savagely instead. He forced her face down in the dirt before she could manage another breath. Next chapter, the rabbit pen. They marched her to the rabbit pen, where about 40 handcuffed Smokies sat inside the wire fence. A dozen or so specials stood in a cordon around them, watching their captives with empty expressions. By the entrance to the compound a few rabbits hopped aimlessly, too addled by their sudden freedom to make a break for it. The special who had captured Tally took her to the end, farthest from the gate, where a handful of Smokies with bloody noses and black eyes were clustered. "Armed resistor," he said to the 2 cruel pretties who guarded this end of the pen, and shoved her down to the ground among the others. She stumbled back and fell onto her back, where the weight stretched the cuffs painfully across her wrist. When she struggled to turn over, a foot planted itself into her back and pushed her up. For a moment she thought the shoe belonged to a special, but it was one of the other Smokies, helping her up the only way he could. She managed to sit up, cross-legged. The wounded Smokies around her smiled grimly, nodding encouragement. "Tally," someone hissed. She struggled to turn towards the voice. It was Croy, a cut over his eye bleeding down his cheek, and one side of his face covered with dirt. He scooted himself a bit closer. "You've resisted?" he said. "Huh. Guess I was wrong about you." Tally could only cough. Traces of burning peppers seemed stuck in her lungs, and the embers of a fire that wouldn't go out. Tears still streamed from her eyes. "I noticed you slept through the breakfast call this morning," he said. "Then when the specials came, I figured you'd picked an awfully convenient time to disappear." She shook her head, forcing the words through the cinders in her throat. "I was out late with David, that's all." Speaking made her sore jaw ache. Croy frowned. "I haven't seen him all morning." "Really?" She blinked away tears. "Maybe he got away." "I doubt anyone did." Croy jutted his chin towards the gate of the pen. A large group of Smokies was on its way, guarded by a squad of specials. Among them, Tally recognized the faces of those who'd made a stand at the mess hall. "They're just mopping up now," he said. "Have you seen Shay?" Croy shrugged. "She was at breakfast when they attacked, but I lost track of her." "What about the boss?" Croy looked around. "No. I think he got away. He and I made a run together." A dark smile crossed Croy's face. "That's funny. He always said he wouldn't mind getting captured. Something about a facelift." Tally managed to smile, but then she thought about the brain lesions that went along with becoming pretty, and a shiver passed through her body. She wondered how many of these captives knew what was going to happen to them. "Yeah, the boss was going to give himself up to help me get away, but I couldn't have made it through the forest." "Why not?" She wiggled her toes. "No shoes." Roy raised an eyebrow. "You picked the wrong day to sleep late." "I guess so." Outside the overcrowded rabbit pen, the new arrivals were being organized into groups. A pair of specials moved through the pen, flashing a reader into the bound Smoky's eyes, taking them outside one by one. "They must be separating everyone by city," Croy said. "Why?" "To take us home," he said coldly. "Home," she repeated. Just last night the word had changed its meaning in her head, and now home was destroyed. It lay around her in ruins, burning and captured. She scanned the captives, looking for Shay and David. The familiar faces in the crowd were haggard, dirty, and crumpled by shock and defeat, but Tally realized that she no longer thought of them as ugly. It was the cold expression of the specials, beautiful though they were, that seemed horrific to her now. A disturbance caught her eye. 3 of the invaders were carrying a struggling figure, bound hand and foot through the pen. They marched straight to the resistor's corner and dumped her onto the ground. It was Shay. "Watch this one." The 2 specials guarding them glanced at the still writhing figure. "Armed resistor?" one asked. There was a pause. Tally saw that one of the specials had a bruise marring his pretty face. Unarmed, but dangerous. The 3 left their captive behind, their cruel grace marked with a touch of hurry. "Shay!" Croy hissed. Shay rolled herself over. Her face was red, her lips puffy and bleeding. She spat, saliva tailing from her mouth to the blood-red glob on the dusty ground. "Croy," she managed with a thick tongue. Then her eyes fell on Tally. "You!" Shay," Croy began. "You did this." Her whole body writhed like a snake in its death's throes. "Stealing my boyfriend wasn't enough? You had to betray the whole smoke?" Tally closed her eyes and shook her head. It couldn't be true. She had destroyed the pendant. The fire had consumed it. "Shay," Croy said, "calm down. Look at her. She bought them." "Are you blind, Croy? Look around you. She did this." Tally took a deep breath and forced herself to look at Shay. Her friend's eyes burned with hatred. "Shay, I swear to you, I never," her voice faltered. "Who else could have led them here? I don't know." We can't blame each other, Shay," Croy said. "It could have been anything. A satellite image, a scouting mission, a spy." "Would you look at her, Shay?" Croy cried. "She's tied up, like us. She resisted." Shay slammed her eyes shut and shook her head. The 2 specials with the eye readers had reached the resistor's corner of the pen. One stood back while the other stepped forward warily. "We don't want to hurt you," she announced, "but we will if we have to." The cruel pretty grabbed Croy's chin and flashed the reader in his eyes. She looked at its readout. "Another one of ours," she said. The other special raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know we had so many runaways." The 2 hauled Croy to his feet and marched him out towards the largest group of Smokies outside. Tally bit her lip. Croy was one of Shay's old friends, so maybe these 2 specials were from her own city. Maybe all the invaders were. It had to be a coincidence. This couldn't be her fault. She'd seen the pendant burn. "So you've got Croy on your side too, now I see," Shay hissed. Tears began to fill Tally's eyes, but not from the pepper this time. "Look at me, Shay. He suspected you from the beginning, but I told him every time. No, Tally's my friend. She'd never do anything to hurt me. Shay, I'm not lying." "How did you change Croy's mind, Tally? The same way you changed David's?" "Shay, I never meant for that to happen." "So where were you 2 last night?" Tally swallowed, trying to hold her voice steady. "Just talking. I told him about my necklace." "That took all night? Or did you just decide to make your move before the specials came? One last game with him. With me." Tally lowered her head. "Shay." A hand grabbed her chin and forced it up. She blinked, and a dazzling red light flashed. The special looked at his device closely. "Hey, it's her." Tally shook her head. "No." The other special looked at the readout, nodding confirmation. "Tally Youngblood?" She didn't answer. They lifted her to her feet and dusted her off. "Come with us. Dr. Cable wants to see you immediately." "I knew it," Shay hissed. "No." They pulled Tally to the gate of the pen. She twisted her head around to look back, trying to think of words that would explain. Shay glared up at her from the ground, bloody teeth gritted, her eyes falling to Tally's bound wrists. A second later Tally felt the pressure release, and her hands popped apart. The special had cut her handcuffs. No, she said softly. One of the specials squeezed her shoulders. Don't worry, Tally. We'll have you home in no time. The other chimed in. We've been looking for this bunch for years. Yeah, good work. And that's the end of our chapters for today. Tune in tomorrow to see what happens next. Bye.